So moving on to the absorption of digested food. So we have got absorption that takes place at the lowest end of the small intestines. Okay, so over here we have got a part of the intestinal wall. So when we take out a component of this intestinal wall, a small section, as you can see by this black box, when you expand it out, you get this structure. Okay, now this is not the end. To increase the surface area to volume ratio, remember or recall that we need the cells to be as small as possible. Similar to how you cut your potatoes to be as small as you possibly could like in order for them to be cooked at a more rapid rate. So when you take out a small section of this and you expand it out here, what you get are all these little microvilli. Okay, so microvilli, they are the smallest components, and they will then be able to absorb food substances, digested food substances, at a much faster rate. Okay, so what are some of the features that will enable the small intestines to absorb substances? Okay, and this is through the diffusion process. So recall, you have got the topic on movement of substances in living things. You have got three: osmosis, diffusion, and active transport. Okay, so in this case we are looking at diffusion process. Okay, osmosis is only for water. We will touch on active transport soon regarding this area, a recap to the previous chapter. Okay, so what are some of the features? It is extremely long. Okay, imagine you have got 6 meters of the small intestines rolled up within you itself. It is only possible due to the many numerous folds that are present for sufficient absorption. Okay, so since it is diffusion, it means to say that it will have to maintain a diffusion gradient. Okay, so diffusion gradient is similar to what we know as the concentration gradient. So concentration gradient, as long as it is a high concentration gradient, it will allow absorption of substances much more rapidly. Okay. It is only 1 cell thick, so being 1 cell thick, it will increase the surface area to volume ratio, and this happens hand in hand along with the finger-like projections. Okay, so the finger-like projections that they are talking about is all these little projections that you see here. Okay, so all these little projections, they can then be expanded to give you even smaller little projections that are numerous in numbers. Okay, so SAVR is surface area and volume ratio. Okay, so further increasing your microvilli, which is this component. Okay, so remember just now we mentioned that you have got osmosis, diffusion, and active transport. Okay, so active transport of substances is at the small intestine is mainly glucose. Why? Because glucose is a main energy source for the body. Okay, so every other substances, they are absorbed via diffusion, with the exception of glucose, as we saw in an earlier chapter. Okay, so what I'm doing is bring in earlier chapters that you have learned so that you can combine the areas of knowledge together. Okay, now the last part of this topic is whereby your water is being reabsorbed. Okay, so imagine if you are drinking about 3-4 liters a day over 24 hours, of course, not the entire amount at one shot. So some of this water will be reabsorbed back because they are required by the body. So whatever that is not reabsorbed will then enter into the large intestines. Okay, so since the large intestines have all these undigested food, and your undigested food will also contain water component, so which means you will have to bulk these undigested food up, and the bulking is due to cellulose and fiber. Okay, so the bulking is done by the cellulose and fiber itself. So how is it possible that the undigested food moves through the large intestines? It is also by the action called peristalsis. Okay, so peristalsis is the action through the large intestines that helps to move the food throughout the entire process until it is stored in the rectum. Okay, so if it is not time yet, or the person is not ready to go to the washroom, it will be stored in the rectum temporarily and then removed through the anus. Okay, so the removal through the anus is called egestion. Some schools will use this term egestion, some schools will only introduce this at upper levels. So if your school do not use this, you don't have to worry too much about it.